Hey, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to paint this terrain piece from the INF Deepkin army. It's this cool sunken ship. It's like a Sigmar ship that's sunk. And I thought since it's in two pieces, it's a good chance to test out Drybrush versus Airbrush and see what the effects look like. This scheme though is going to match an iridescent light scheme that I did a whole army in that this is going with. Here's the inspiration right now. These are models I painted like a year ago. This was all with a brush actually, no airbrush needed for this, but I'm going to show you two different ways here. On one side of the ship we're going to use an airbrush, the other side we'll use a dry brush. First off, I primed both models in Surface Primer Black, and then what I did was I mixed a little bit of Surface Primer Black with a dark blue, navy imperial blue from Army Painter. And then all I did was basically coat the entire model in this color as well. Since it's a very close color to the black primer, it's not a huge contrast. Here I'm doing it with the airbrush, but neck you'll see later in the dry brush I do the same exact step. Next I started laying down the light points and points of reference for the light. So what I did was I mixed a little more imperial blue into this black blend I have in my airbrush already. Which is nice about this and the dry brush is we only have to add more and more color to our mix. We don't have to completely clean out either our dry brush or our airbrush because we're just slowly building up colors with more and more paint. So it's a pretty fluid process. It doesn't take a long time to dry and there's not a lot of cleanup necessary, which is great. When I'm picking my light out on this model, it's not true OSL. And it's not light coming from above in a lot of ways. This iridescent light, a lot of it is being generated by either algae or bacteria or some kind of living organism on the sunken ship. So that's where the light's coming from. I guess it can be seen as OSL, but it's really not the same as like a huge bright light source letting off a lot of light. It's a very dim, slow glow effect. What I'm doing here is I'm just adding more and more of this imperial blue into my airbrush mix, and I'm slowly going over each pass, each part of the model I pick out. With the blue, I'm adding more and more blue to it. In this pass, what I'm actually adding in is a little bit of my turquoise now. So I'm in a mix of imperial blue and a turquoise. Continuing on to our next color, I mix more of the turquoise into the imperial blue. We're moving more into a turquoise color, so what I'm doing now is I'm just mainly focusing more on the tips of whatever point of light I chose. So I'm aiming towards the tops of anything that I've already hit blue, and I'm just going to slowly decrease the amount of spray that I'm hitting on each part to resemble a nice gradient of a glow effect. As I add more turquoise and then to my highlight color of green blue from Vallejo, you can see it starts to come in more effectively of like what I'm trying to get across with the model, especially when you jump to that blue-green color, which is super poppy. It really, you see it start coming together a lot better, and the overspray definitely starts to concentrate more. Now before I go to the highest highlight, I'm just going to go over to my dry brush now. So I repeat all the same steps with all the same paint. So I have a huge makeup brush here and I'm just covering the entire model in a mix of imperial navy blue and black paint. I actually used primer again here because I already had it out. And I'm just covering the entire model. I'm using a stippling motion and a dry brushing motion, but my dry brush isn't really that dry. It's mainly just applying paint at this point, so it's pretty wet. It's just applying paint. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding more blue to my dry brush, and I'm starting to do the same process as I did last time, where I'm picking out the places I want this algae to collect on the vessel, the sunken ship, that will emit the light. When I start, I'm really doing more of a stippling motion because I am trying to get paint onto this model. It's not necessarily like dry brush just hitting the edges. I really need to put some paint on the model, so I'm definitely doing more of a stippling motion than a dry brush motion. just working more and more blue paint into my dry brush, using my wet sponge to reactivate my paint once. Usually you get one reactivation with a wet sponge, and then you got to put more paint on the brush, but it helps you, move the paint a little bit more than your brush drying out all the time. A good dish sponge is a great tool to use when you're dry brushing. Now that I'm mixing some turquoise into my mix, I'm really starting to define where my stippling is really needing to go. Here I'm doing more of an edge highlight motion of swipes and light brushing, but I'm also stippling some edges that definitely need more contrast with this turquoise color. And as you can see, the more and more passes you go, the more paint you let down, and then the more contrast you get to build. Again, just like with the airbrush, we don't ever have to really wash this brush. We just need to re-dampen it with the sponge. So what I'll do is, if my brush dries out, I'll hit the sponge one time, reactivate the paint, go in a few more times. When I'm out of paint, I go right back to the dry palette, mix them back up, make sure my brush is a little damp, and go right back in. It's a very quick process, especially on a big model like this. Now I'm working in some of that blue-green from Vallejo, and I'm really starting to pick out these edges of where the light's going to be coming from of this iridescent algae. Here are my two pieces, left side airbrush, right side of dry brush. I think it's pretty interesting the two ways. There's definitely a lot more overspray on the airbrush, obviously, because it is an airbrush and I was a little loose with it. But I do like both looks. One's a little more defined than the other, but I like the soft glow of the airbrush as well. Now I'm going to finish both pieces the same exact way with a brush. So really all I'm doing is I have a light turquoise, a mint green, and a sky blue on my palette. And I'm just going to build up through those three colors, and I'm going to slowly glaze onto the edges of where my algae bacteria would be landing. And this is going to be the true light source build of my glow. With glazing, it's kind of nice when you have a piece like this because you can go over an entire side of the ship, put it down, continue onto the other side of the ship, and then by the time you're done, the other side's dry. So you can just keep going and going. It's really not that long of a process because it does dry pretty quickly. And it's a little forgiving if you kind of reactivate the glaze medium, or the glaze paint that's on there. It's usually okay if you reactivate it a little bit. It's not going to mess up the model too much. Since we are using glazes, they're also very forgiving if we make a mistake because you're really letting down a teeny bit of paint at a time that's going down very transparently. So if you do mess up, it's very easy to fix it. A wet brush is usually the best way to do it. I use my tongue sometimes or my fingers, just however to get the paint off where it's not supposed to be. And there you have it. Pretty simple scheme here. It's a pretty cool concept, I think, the iridescent light. I mean, I did a whole army in it because I thought it was cool. It helps you kind of get away with using this very high contrast method of painting where I don't need to paint the whole model. Most of this model is black, but when you're looking at the table, your eyes are immediately drawn to this cool glow iridescent light effect. Who cares if the rest of the model is black? It's not what you're looking at. So I think it's a really effective way to paint stuff like this if you want this kind of under the sea, deep sea theme, but super simple and just showing how, if you're doing a smooth gradient of one color, you don't have to go too crazy with washing out your airbrush or your dry brush, and both methods are very effective. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you.